Are there other ways to practice affirmation that aren't necessarily looking at yourself in the mirror? Does writing it down work? Like writing down things that you're grateful for that we talked about in another video. Can you write down perhaps your affirmations and what you believe about yourself?
Absolutely. So you can, like, I actually strongly recommend to write it down, because when you write it down, when you reread it before you start to say those things out loud, you actually can rework the words and everything. And basically, you want to keep the same affirmation from a day to another. Maybe you're going to change it once every 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever. I've seen some people, they're changing this every 2 or 3 days. There's like, there's no right or wrong. It's just like you feel. But yeah, like strongly, you can write it down. If you don't want to look at yourself in the mirror, and I remember that's what I was doing like a few months ago when I was doing that exercise. I wasn't doing this in front of the mirror simply because I was in the bathroom and that was in our ensuite, whatever. But basically, I was in a special room in the house, like a bit separated. And so I remember in that room there was no mirror. There was just a couch in the middle of the room. And what I used to do is I used to walk around in circle around the couch, and I used to repeat this sentence over and over and over and over and over again, until I was really convincing myself to be like I said, to be buzzing. Literally, there was that. And what I realized was that the more I was going, the faster my pace was getting when I was walking around, and my body expression was changing as well. And I realized that when I was getting at the top, at the peak, when I was really convincing myself, I realized that there was my fists were clenching. I remember that. And it was really giving me that kind of that little oomph, if you prefer, that little power into that. So what is very interesting when you do the exercise of affirmation, over looking at yourself in the mirror, is really to convince yourself. You don't need to look at yourself in the mirror for that. You need to feel, and this goes back to awareness. You need to feel how your body reacts. How do you feel inside of you right there? And if you feel that you're not there yet, maybe you need to add a little physical signal to bring that extra energy pump into that.
Awesome. So for people who perhaps are suffering from a lack of self-confidence, how can that negatively impact your life?
Well, we talked a few times about, public speaking. If you put someone that has a lack of self-confidence and you throw them on stage while they have that fear right there, basically they're going to freeze. They're completely going to freeze. And because they're going to freeze, the words are not going to come out. So if you prefer, the lack of self-confidence will actually be manifested differently from a person to another. Everyone has kind of their own reaction to a lack of self-confidence. Some people will freeze. Some people will avoid situation as much as possible, so they're really gonna get away from it. Some people will cry. Some people, funny enough, will develop an anti-mechanism that could be like, basically because they're not confident, they're going to try to overcompensate with something else. So they're going to try to overcompensate on a certain thing where they're sure that they know about it. So for example, they're going to grab a little bit of information that they know is true and they can rely on, and they're confident about that information, and they're going to spread it around like butter on a piece of bread, if you prefer, as much as possible. So they're going to make they're going to think that people they're going to make them think that people will think that they know everything about everything. That's the type of example, right? So everyone has a different reaction basically to a lack of self-confidence. There's really like no specific case, but what I can say is that consistently a lack of self-confidence has a negative impact. I've never seen a lack of self-confidence to be positive, actually, because you feel bad about yourself. Internally speaking, you feel bad about yourself, and it diminishes yourself. So it's a very nasty thing to have a lack of self-confidence.
So if we flip that round, how can increased self-confidence positively impact someone's life? What are the benefits of having good self-confidence?
It's empowering. It's empowering, and it's when you're empowered, you have no limit. So because you have no limit, everything is possible. You know what I mean? So it's really about like I like to say when I work with my clients, I like to ask them. I said, okay, forget who you are completely. Forget your name. Forget your background. Forget everything that you know about yourself. Tomorrow morning you wake up, you have the dream life. What does that look like? And that's the first question that I ask my client when they start working with me. So at the beginning, they're a little bit like, okay, that's strange. So slowly they start to bloom, if you prefer, and they start to come up with some ideas. And I keep pushing them, because the reality is, if I were to give you your dream life, you would go for something extremely crazy, extremely big, where the sky is the limit. And even then, you can still go above and beyond. So once we reach that stage, my next question is always, what's in the way for it? And most of the time, what's in the way is a lack of self-confidence. Because they don't have the confidence. They're like, I'm not good enough to be that type of person. I'm not good enough to be the next Bill Gates. I'm not good enough to be the next Steve Jobs, whoever it is, name it, right? But they think that I'm not as smart as them and everything. And this is a dangerous game, because you're comparing yourself to someone else, and because of that, you diminish yourself because you compare yourself to someone else. While everyone has their own value, everyone has their own level, and there's nothing right or wrong. And it's a shame because they're comparing themselves to bigger things out here, bigger people, then it shakes their self-confidence. And so because of that, they're not going to do a lot of things. So basically, when you let self-confidence take over, the lack of self-confidence taking over, basically you're just shutting doors on yourself. That's literally what you're doing. You're shutting doors on yourself, and you closing opportunities. That's it.
Do you think that people who compare themselves to others, do you think that comparison and lack of self-confidence goes hand in hand? And perhaps even imposter syndrome, where people who, well, doing anything really, but perhaps who are running their own businesses, they think that someone might find out that they're not actually capable of doing what they're doing. Do you think those kind of things, comparison and imposter syndrome, then affect people's self-confidence because they think of themselves in these certain ways? Then they're not going to act as confident, or they're not going to try new things because they're lacking that, because of the comparison or the imposter syndrome?
Yeah, there's two things right here. Regarding people comparing themselves to other people, it's a double-edged sword. Like I said, when you compare yourself to someone else, basically you're not very realistic about your own value, because or what you're worth, if you prefer, because when you compare yourself to someone else, most of the time you're going to compare yourself to some of the best in the world, and that's the truth. So, like, you know, if you talk about Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, or that type of people, we're talking about some of the best in the world out here. Is it fair to compare ourselves to those people on a daily basis? I'm not sure. Now, if I were to compare myself to the neighbor, then it's a different level. You know what I mean? The neighbor seems to be a lot more within reach than Bill Gates or Steve Jobs. So when you compare yourself to someone else, it's a double-edged sword in a way that you could diminish yourself because you're looking at a mountain, literally. But then on the other hand, it could be a positive thing, because if you're able to take the positive out of it, then that's great. If you look into the path of Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, it's about like, how have they become so successful? What is the path that they took to become so successful? Because you're looking up to that, then you will get inspired by them, because you get inspired. Basically, the experience that they develop over 30 years, you might learn it within 3 months. Basically, all the mistakes that they've made, you're gonna learn. They learn from it, and the process that they have right now was built on those mistakes. So if you copy what they're doing now, then you know that you're copying a methodology that's been built on mistake that they've already done. So you're not going to do those mistakes. So comparing yourself to some of the best of the world, like I said, it could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing, and it's really about how do people take that. But I would say it really takes self-motivation and self-awareness to realize that it's not to take the positive and reject the negative. You know what I mean? It takes a bit of effort to do that. So that would be the first thing here. The second thing is you're talking about the imposter syndrome. It's actually a very interesting one because I studied that case actually with one of my clients because he was really driven by this by that syndrome, and he was actually very afraid of it. And so the interesting thing regarding that is those people are driven. It's not so much by a lack of self-confidence. I think it's the fear of failure. And so there is a very fine line between the lack of self-confidence and the fear of failure. The fear of failure is something that everyone has. We all have the fear of failure because of what it represents. You know, if I fail, it represents X, Y, Z. But once you start to accept the fact that failure is part of the success, then failure becomes a lot different. If we keep talking about Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and all those type of people, they all had to fail about 1,000 times before they were able to become the people that they are today. So if you prefer, I would say there's a lack of self-confidence that people think that they won't be able to step up again if they fail. And this is where the lack of self-confidence kicks in, is the fear of not being able to get back up once you fail, which is never the case, by the way. Every time we fail, we always get back on our feet, always.